Alright, so here we are now in Cold War IV, and we're now focusing on our next geopolitical sphere. Our first geopolitical battle was Berlin, and now we've moved to Asiatic countries of China and Korea. Okay? Now, following the whole idea, if you remember, we had a conference with Chiang Kai-shek in which we promised to return Korea. However, it doesn't work like that, right? It never will. We want self-determination. We want them to decide. Because they're so close to, Soviet Union, we're afraid they can be communist. So, in the Cairo Accords, we basically decide we're going to split Korea along the 38th parallel. It's the line of latitude, longitude. And North Korea would be occupied by the Soviets. South Korea would be occupied by the Democratic, the United States, France, England, etc. And eventually, over time, we would leave, and these two countries would decide on what type of government they would want. We made this mistake here. We made it in Vietnam, and we're going to see both times why it's not successful. So, Korea split, as I said, into the 38th parallel. Now, if you notice, there was a buffer zone between the Soviet Union and Korea, and that was China. Okay. Now, China had long had a civil war, and I talked about this before, with Chiang Kai-shek, a nationalist backed by the United States, and Mao Zedong, a communist backed by the Soviet Union. They put their fighting aside during World War II to get rid of the Japanese. The Japanese are now gone. So we'll get there. Now, in North Korea, the guy who comes to power is named Kim Il-sung. Okay, he starts the Il dynasty, Kim Jong-il, etc., in North Korea. These guys are seen as infallible, meaning they cannot make mistakes. These men are seen as almost godlike, and you're not supposed to do anything but just reverence them, okay? Now, Kim Il-sung starts the idea of what is called fatherland liberation. He wants all foreign ideas kicked out of Korea, become one nation again. Well, communism is a foreign idea as well. Kim, sorry. But he doesn't see it as that. He sees it as perfectly fine. So he's going to begin to kind of put pressure on South Korea to become back. Now, we are helping out South Korea, and we're saying you need to back off. He's not going to invade because he's still kind of afraid of us, okay? Then, the worst thing that could have possibly happened. The Soviet Union had a ton of people. Another populous nation right next to him was China, had a ton of people. Beginning in the 1950s, China will become communist. Mao Zedong comes to power. We have the Cultural Revolution. We have purges. It is a very chaotic time to live in China. They changed their flag. It looks kind of familiar, right? Hammer and the sickle. We have that in the Soviet flag. And now the two most populous countries in the world are communist. The other scary thing is, remember what China's pegged up against? North Korea. So with that now being said, there's going to be some pressure put on North Korea, correct? Now, North Korea, with China backing, will invade South Korea and basically kick off a war. Now, the United Nations, once China has become communist, actually recognizes two governments of China. The United Nations will recognize the communist led by Mao, and also the nationalist in the country we now call Taiwan, led by Chiang Kai-shek. Well, this kind of upsets Stalin. So when Kim and North Korea invade the South, Stalin is actually boycotting the United Nations, saying they've caused a problem. Is everybody good there? So as they're invading, the United Nations now has to see this as what it is. It's an invocation. You're messing with the country. You've got to have an answer, right? So they vote. Now, only one member of the Security Council saying nay or vetoing it would stop this. Now, the only person who would have said, don't go mess with North Korea is Soviet Union, but they are not there. So there's nobody to stop what is going to happen. And that is the United Nations votes to do a police action. Now here we have Truman. He's leading in the spirit here. You can see he's going over the League of Nations. And this is a big criticism that the League of Nations never punish people for violating what they signed. The UN says we're going to punish North Korea. They signed this. They're going to abide by it. And so help me, it's going to happen. So the UN Peace Force is put in there. The United States, of course, is in charge of it, and the guy in charge is Douglas MacArthur. Okay. Now Truman and Korea will come up with an idea called limited war. Limited war, low casualties, no military draft or conscription, limited military action, absolutely no nuclear weapons, and only limited for foreign powers. Okay? So basically, we're going to let the Koreans more or less fight it out, but we're going to kind of help out, and then China would get involved as well. We're not going to use nuclear weapons. We don't want to wipe them out. We simply want to send them back across to their side so that they recognize we are in charge, right? That's the whole goal. Now, there's a big debate between Douglas MacArthur and Harry Truman, and you can see there, maybe funny or not, to nuke or not to nuke. That is the question, right? Shakespeare. Truman wants to nuke China and start this big geopolitical battle similar to a world war. Truman says, absolutely not, we're not going to do this. And there's a big debate, and we'll talk about in class what the end result was for MacArthur and for Truman. Korea is going to be the first of two proxy wars during the Cold War. Now, proxy means you get someone to take your place. Basically, the United States is going to fight the Soviet Union by fighting the Chinese and the North Koreans taking their place. We never fought the Soviet Union, hence Cold War. But we did fight the North Koreans and the Chinese that were getting training and weapons from them. So we call this a proxy war. Afghanistan would be considered a proxy war. The Syrian Civil War we're involved in would be called a proxy war. Vietnam is a proxy war. And so for this reason, Korea is considered the forgotten war. But we'll get into more logistics and particulars on the Korean War in class, all right? But that's what you need to know for right now.